Hello and welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink, and this is the third episode in our series FRIGHT LITE, non-horror horror movies. Today we'll be talking about Bug from 2006.
When you drop those off, come to the jukebox. I want to introduce you to somebody.
You're very beautiful.
I like hearing you talk. If you want, you can stay here tonight.
That'd be nice.
They live in your blood.
What is that?
Hey, you see it? It's a bug.
Jerry, you can't stay here.
You throwing me out? Place is crawling with these things.
And they feed on your brain.
There's no bugs on your skin. You have to
dig it out.
I'll dig it out and show you.
This spring, from the Academy Award-winning director of The Exorcist,
Open the door!
comes the movie the Chicago Tribune calls one of the most disturbing horror movies imaginable.
We have to kill her.
They want you to know they're there.
Bug.
We'll never really be safe again.
Bug is a 2006 psychological thriller film directed by William Friedkin of The Exorcist fame and written by Tracy Letts based on his 1996 play of the same name. The film stars Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon. It's the story of a young woman living in a motel who meets and quickly falls for a strange drifter. Shortly into their relationship, they begin finding aphids in her room and share each other's increasing paranoia over the bugs.
Over the bugs.
Over the bugs.
This movie, yeah, so we're going to, usually we kind of chat before, me and Jeremy, before we start recording about the movie, like briefly, and we did not do that this time, so just for time reasons, but now I'm really curious to get into it here with Bug and hear your general thoughts on the film. I guess before we even really get into it, before we describe anything about it, what did you think about this film?
Yeah, so I love this. I thought this was crazy. It was a lot of fun. I've been on a big kick of reading plays lately. I've been,
me too.
Yeah,
me too. That's funny.
So it was fun because I think when this one started out, I don't know if you've ever read the play. I think there's a movie of it too. The play "Fool for Love," written by Sam Shepard. I haven't. It's very similar kind of beginning. Set somewhere in middle rural America. Man and a woman at a kind of rundown motel, and I was like, I'm kind of surprised that this is in our non-horror horror. It doesn't really feel like horror at all. It just kind of
exactly.
felt it just kind of starts out like a very straightforward woman with an abusive ex-husband meeting a new man. I'm like, all right, we're in for some relationship drama. Maybe it's just kind of a scary tone.
Very unassuming how it starts.
Yeah, very unassuming. Although there is something, we'll get into it. It's unassuming how it starts, but I think there is an underlying tone of horror. But still, they don't lean too hard on it in the early going there. But yeah, once it kicks in, once we really get going with this one, it really
goes full force.
Yeah, it goes full force.
I had actually forgotten, because I had seen it years before, but I had forgotten just how full force it goes. It really does. But did you, as a cult movie fan, did you appreciate, I guess, the over-the-top quality that it kind of takes on?
Yeah, I did. And I know it happens, once it kicks, it kind of moves really fast. There's kind of a jump at one point where we go from it, it's getting a little out of control to like totally out of control. And
it goes from a bug in the room, like one bug in the room or something in the... what is it? The smoke alarm or something?
Yeah, bug in the smoke alarm too.
And then it goes from that to
millions.
Millions. But, I love that part.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like it worked for me. I know I was reading because I was curious with this one because I feel like it flew under the radar a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
I guess a lot because I think I'd heard of this movie before, but wasn't really familiar with any of the lore surrounding it or hadn't heard too much, which is kind of strange because Tracy Letts is a renowned playwright. William Friedkin is a renowned director. Yeah. Michael Shannon, it's like...
Michael Shannon, Ashley Judd is a big, especially at that time, she was in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
And that was part of the reason I really wanted to talk about this movie. I've actually been wanting to talk about this for a long time, this movie, because I feel like it is pretty... underrated, and even though I think it is sort of a cult film now at this point.
Yeah.
I think it took a while for people even to take notice of it and to maybe just see how strange it is. So I wanted to get a chance on the show to talk about it, because I don't know, something about this film, I just really react to this film. Like I just really, I get engaged with it. So let's rewind a little bit, as we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But so this series is called Fright Light, and I think this film definitely fits into the category of like a non-horror horror film, for sure. And I wanted to mention the irony of the title Fright Light, because I'm realizing, Jeremy, that these are probably like the heaviest movies that we've ever covered on this show, just thematically and like subject matter wise.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
Yeah, pretty, with now 2 films that we've talked about have dealt with like war veterans and things like that. And of course the loss of a child, which also comes into play here, as it did in Jacob's Ladder. So things like that, but this is definitely an odd movie, because it's sort of this very mature movie about damaged people and about loss and these kinds of things, but then it's also about bugs. Yeah. And at times, as we kind of alluded to, it gets pretty out there. Like I really, I didn't remember just how out there it does get. And I think part of that is because, especially once you realize that this is based on a play, it makes a lot more sense. At least it did to me. Just how over the top, like it's very theatrical towards the end, which envisioning. I've never seen the play. I actually would love to see this.
Yeah, same. I was just gonna say, I'd be so curious to see how they would do it in a play.
How they would do it, with the tinfoil and everything. But I think this movie is actually very close, from what I've read. It's very close to how the actual play was. Basically all in one location and everything with the 2 characters. I just, once you know that, it kind of takes on a different, you kind of look at the film in a different way. I kind of forget what my original point was here, but anyway, what I was trying to say was that, just how theatrical it is. And, again, it's something that I kind of like, I don't know. It kind of gets under my skin. I guess it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, pun intended.
To use. For this movie, but it just kind of, it creeps up on you because it is so unassuming in the beginning, and but when it gets there, it goes all out. So one of the main things I want to talk about with this film is, and one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about it for this series in particular, is that I wanted to talk about how this film was advertised versus reality, versus how what the film actually is. So when my friends and I guess around this time I was just seeing a lot of movies, I don't know, as young people do. And I went with a group of friends and we went to the theaters and we saw this movie. And I'm pretty sure we were just expecting to walk into a much more straightforward horror experience, because it was advertised as a horror film. I think they even used the word horror. And I might use the clip from the trailer, which they use that trailer guy voice from around this time, where it's kind of like holdover from the 90s, where he's like, and this is Michael Shannon in Bug, Bug. Ashley Judd, get under your skin, it's like kind of that kind of a thing.
It's funny to imagine someone
that's
saying,
how it was.
It's funny to imagine someone saying Harry Connick Jr. in that voice for some reason.
Harry Connick Jr. Yeah.
Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah.
Singing Sinatra's greatest hits.
All your favorite hits. So we were not sure. We thought we were in for, just a straightforward horror movie about bugs. I don't know. We didn't really know what, like giant bugs. We didn't know what it was. But that was certainly not what we got, but in a very good way, I think. It because also in the trailer, again, which I'll most likely play in the final episode of this, they really pushed that exorcist angle, like the whole possession thing. They show shots of Michael Shannon kind of like convulsing and things like that, and which does happen in the movie. But William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, and they kind of show you those things. So again, it's like, and they kind of give you the notion that it's like almost like a sci-fi kind of thriller horror movie thing, which it really is not at all. But
No.
I guess it kind of, I don't know. I mean, I guess a little bit.
I mean, I guess it's one of those movies that kind of depends on how much of it kind of how you interpret it.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly,
if you take everything that the Peter character is saying literally and believe that to be the reality, then it absolutely is a sci-fi thriller. If you take it to be two people just losing their minds in a motel room, then it's not a sci-fi thriller at all. It's just two people
and
losing
I think
their
that's
minds.
I think that's part of what I like about it. It's you could really look at it either way, and and in that sense, some of the over the topness or the exaggerated quality of it kind of works even more. I think. Depending on how you look at it. But because really it's it is sort of that, with the sci-fi horror, like there's definitely that is there somewhat, but it's much more just about these two people. And that's another thing I like. And like you, Jeremy, I've been reading a lot of plays recently for whatever reason. Just really been enjoying reading plays. So, and I've always loved going to theater and stuff like that. So I think I appreciate that quality of this as well. So let's just talk a little bit. I'm not going to go scene by scene or anything, but I just want to kind of set the scene at least a little bit of what the movie is showing to us. So the film starts, I actually really like the opening to this movie. It starts with the sound of a phone ringing, which is something that happens throughout the film. I guess sort of like a motif. And I really like that opening tracking shot. It's like it comes in from so far away, and it but it's so ominous and sort of eerie. So you kind of do get that horror, vibe from the beginning. Well, I think a little bit.
I could be wrong. This is with a movie like this. It kind of messes with your brain so much that you lose the order. But doesn't the movie actually doesn't it open really quickly? At least I think in the version I watched, open really quickly with a shot of somebody dead on the ground. Like in that tinfoil covered room. Is that before the phone ringing or is that after?
Yeah, there.
I think it might be before.
I don't remember if you hear it before. Yeah, I think it might be the very first, because I do remember that being sort of striking that you. So the very first image, you're right, Jeremy, is not the tracking shot. It's a very quick shot of the dead body on the floor in the tinfoil
with no context,
no context,
no,
which I love. I love that. Yeah, and the editing. We talked about it with Jacob's Ladder. I want to talk about it. We'll get into it more later, but for sure, some of the editing is just really out there and. So almost subliminal, and I think it's appropriate for the subject matter of the bugs under the skin and everything. So there's that. That's how the film begins, and the tracking shot is finally settles in on this small motel where we spend essentially the rest of our time. Pretty much, there's a couple of quick scenes outside and at a bar and things like that, but pretty much we're in this motel room for the rest of the film. And it's a sort of like a desert-like region, I guess, in Oklahoma. So again, based on a play and a very small and intimate film, really just with these two characters. There is another, so it's Ashley Judd, who plays the main character, I guess you would say, the woman who is sort of on her own, and you eventually learn, she's like an alcoholic, and you learn that she had a son that went missing when she was in a grocery store. Every time she thinks of it or it's mentioned, they cut back to only this one shot of like an empty cart in a grocery store. Yeah, and I think that's kind of neat that they always do that. And because that's all they show you. There's no flashbacks really or anything like that.
I don't think we actually ever see the son.
Right, which is, again, now if you're thinking of this as a play, I think that it makes a lot of sense. I like it. So I like that they didn't really they didn't seem like they added too much. Again, I haven't seen the play, the original work that's based on, but it seems like they weren't going and adding scenes and things like that, like haphazardly. But right off the bat, you do get that feeling of paranoia with her answering, because the phone keeps ringing and she keeps don't call me. First she doesn't pick it up, and then she's kind of yelling into the phone. And that paranoid feeling really permeates the film. So that's there in the beginning, but obviously it increases, it gets a lot more. And we've discussed conspiracy theories as well, actually, in this series, among other similar subject matter. In our last episode on Jacob's Ladder. So there's, that definitely comes into play here. Also, like in Jacob's Ladder, the film deals with PTSD a little bit, and just a little bit. It's again, you don't know exactly what's happening or what's going on. So I mean, you don't even know if what the characters are telling you is true or not.
Yeah.
But if we're to believe that he was a soldier, I guess in a much more recent war than Jacob's Ladder. But eventually he starts describing experiments, and this is a character played by Michael Shannon, Peter, and he starts describing experiments, which is very interesting because I didn't even make that connection when I had recommended this.
Yeah.
That we talk about this movie.
2 movies in a row
that it
about
has so many
soldiers being
similar.
experimented.
Yeah, and then so that causes him to go AWOL basically, and I guess he kind of becomes a drifter character that he sort of shows up with the friend of the main character Agnes, one of her friends, and also like in Jacob's Ladder, there's the loss of a child, which is a big part of the film, and like I mentioned, it's Ashley Judd's character's her son who went missing 10 years prior. So now she's kind of like in this daze state. She's just kind of hanging out in this motel, and I guess she lives there, right?
Yeah.
And
it kind of seems like she's hiding out a little bit because from the beginning, it doesn't seem like she's... Yeah. Like he finds her pretty easily. Well. Yeah, like it seems like the ex-husband is looking for her, and she's not hidden that well because he kind of shows up immediately. But yeah, it kind of seems like there's a thing she was running away from. Yeah.
And when Peter shows up, right away we can tell that he's a very peculiar guy.
Yeah.
Like and a part of that's Michael Shannon. Like,
yeah.
I love him as an actor, but he definitely has that sort of quality to him. I mean, am I wrong with that? Like, I just feel like he, and he plays his character so well. He definitely has that awkward social, like the socially awkward.
The word
going on, and
the word that kept popping into my head with him is like blankness. There was a certain blank quality where it's like
he could be anyone.
He could be anyone because there were moments when he was there and I'm like, I really don't trust this guy. But then there were moments where I was like, oh, he seems like just kind of a pretty good, he's like a kind of awkward, but he seems like a decent guy. And I could never totally get a read on where his decisions were coming from, which is interesting because a lot of the time, when you're talking about characters, building out a good character as an audience member, we should be like on board with their decision making. That's how we kind of understand a character. But I think what made his character so fun and so kind of freaky was just that, like, I didn't really totally understand any of his decisions in the whole movie, because his background and his history is so vague. Like, there's so little we actually know about this guy, other than that he's in Oklahoma, someone's looking for him, and, I mean, that's pretty much it. Other than that, like, we really don't know anything, how much of what he's saying is true or not.
Yeah, the way Friedkin actually described it, because I watched some interviews with him about this movie, and he said, he could be a serial killer. Like, you don't know. The character of Peter, I mean.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely, that's kind of like the intriguing thing about it, when the movie starts, is that you don't know who this person is, and you don't know what he's all about. And then you kind of get the feeling that something strange is going on. But then we have the scene with the chirping smoke alarm, and they think it's a cricket. Is there actually a cricket in there?
I don't think we ever actually see a cricket. Okay. I think the alarm just stops.
I actually don't think we see any bugs in this movie.
Yeah, no, I don't think
quick
we see
shots of.
Yeah, we see shots, but it's not the shots we see aren't, in my mind at least, weren't supposed to be the bugs that were there. I think it's just supposed to be referenced. What was interesting too,
which is cool though. That's really cool.
And there was a really cool sound design. Which, going back to a play, it's like you can't show you can't show an entire theater a bug because it's going to be too small for the people in the mezzanine. Yeah. So you have to imply it. So it was kind of this is interesting because a lot of adaptations of plays kind of fall flat for me because it feels like it's not using cinema. But this one, it's almost like the elements that would make it work as a play also made it work as a movie. But there was a great sound design bit with that smoke detector part because you hear it chirping and it really sounds like a bug at first. But then I mean maybe I imagine this, but that's kind of the point of this movie is when you actually see the smoke alarm, it sounds a little more like a smoke alarm. I could be wrong. It could be the exact same sound, and maybe that's just how it was in my brain. But I could almost swear that like on that cut. It was more of a smoke alarm sound and less of a chirping sound.
It probably was. They probably did something because they definitely did some interesting things with the editing and the sound as well. But even now, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wait, did they show the bugs? So they did a really good job with that kind of stuff in the movie. And this is our first allusion to bugs in the movie, really. And also the first scene where we actually we get the hint of Peter's paranoia.
Yeah.
He tells Agnes of a radioactive element in smoke alarms that she should be careful of, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, like.
But it kind of got me because I'm sitting there looking at my own smoke alarm, like shit. Like,
I know. I was thinking that too. I'm like,
this movie really kind of gets in your head and like messes with.
It does.
You start questioning things.
Exactly. Yeah. So first you're just like, oh, that's kind of an odd comment, but all right, maybe.
Yeah. As he's touching it.
As he's, I know, and so yeah, the movie definitely makes you feel like, I don't know, at least me, it makes me feel skeezy. Like it just, I don't know another word for that, but kind of it feels like something is under your skin, and it only increases as the movie builds. Now, admittedly, it is a slow build, I would say. It takes a while to get going. But once it does, as we said, it doesn't really let up. No. So in a sense, you kind of need that build up. I thought, Jeremy, that normalcy in the beginning, in the earlier scenes for it to work, really. You know?
Well, I think it makes you, and this is the thing, I'm always talking about with writer friends and film loving friends of mine, is that in good horror, I feel like it's the thing that makes good horror work is you care about the characters. Like there's so many horror movies out there that have great kills or great set pieces and are really interesting and visually stimulating, but they don't kind of take the time to make you actually invest in the characters and the characters' conflict. And I feel like it might be a little slow at the beginning, but it's intriguing enough. The story and what the characters are going through feels, it feels honest and it feels compelling enough that, like, if this just was a straight drama, I would still be interested in it. And then when the horror element comes in, I'm like genuinely invested, because the thing I think about a lot is, we talk about like the final girl a lot in horror.
Yeah.
And obviously in this, as an audience member, at least personally, I was a lot more concerned about Agnes than I was about Peter. It felt like her going down. But there is this thing where in movies where you have one main character in a horror movie, a lot of the time the question can kind of be, all right, does the character live or die? And that's kind of the only overarching question, which isn't very interesting because if they live, then they defeat the thing, and if they die, then they don't. And that's kind of very black and white. And with this one, even though it was really one main character who we're really invested in, it felt like there was kind of, almost like the fate worse than death kind of thing. Like it was spiraling, and there was something, like I was so concerned what would happen to this character.
Well, she's a very vulnerable character. Agnes, and I mean in a lot of different ways. So when she meets Peter, you kind of you ultimately, like you right off the bat, you kind of feel for her, and you're just like, oh, be careful, Agnes. Don't go too fast with this guy. Like that's how I felt, at least when I first saw it. So Peter, so he's an odd person, and he brings up different things that you're kind of just like, oh, okay, interesting. And then he starts constantly finding bugs all over the motel room because they start a romantic relationship, obviously, and they kind of live together in this motel for a little bit, which we don't know, I guess, how much time has passed. I imagine not too much, but who knows, I guess. but anyway, they so he's constantly finding bugs all over the motel, and so he eventually tells Agnes that people are after him, and tells her about the experiments that he thinks were done on him and when he was in the army. And there's also, he mentions phone calls. So then you start thinking, were there phone calls for him, or were they her ex-husband who was abusive? So you don't really know. Again, another thing there you don't know. And Jeremy, I want to talk about, we try to mention, we gave out like shout outs to different filmmaking techniques a lot in this show, obviously. And one of them that I really appreciated was a piece of some very subjective filmmaking during the sequence when he's telling her all of this. I think so it's as Agnes emerges from the bathroom and embraces Peter because he's about to leave, or she thinks he's about to leave, and then he comes back and she embraces him, and as she does that, the room darkens and everything begins shaking and rumbling, like literally, like the room starts shaking, and we hear extremely loud helicopter blades, kind of alluding both back to the army and also, are there people after him outside in a helicopter right now? We don't know.
Also, a thing that I was thinking about too, when we talk about the helicopter being a motif and those aerial shots, because jumping back to another piece of very subjective filmmaking, but there's a conversation they're having early on where it's just like a shot reverse shot dialogue scene, and we kept cutting to these extreme wide shots of the house from a helicopter. just kind of out of nowhere. Like they'd be in the middle of saying something and we just cut to this wide.
Yeah.
And it's like very, very strange. But also the thing that just came to mind as we were talking here is like also that could almost be a point of view of like bugs. You know, like the idea of like flying bugs and the kind of relationship. No, you're right, yeah. The relationship, like the fluttering of wings, how a helicopter kind of has a similar flight path. It was like, I don't know, there's a lot of very this is the kind of movie I feel like that people who spend all their time thinking about how to make movies get really excited about, because they really use cinema, you know, like they really push, push the limits.
They use all the tricks in the bag, sort of. It's one of those movies.
Yeah,
but I think done like zooms. Oh yeah, that's very freaking as well. Very freaking. And it has his stamp on the film as well, which we're gonna talk about in a little bit. So that's sort of interesting, in a good way. I think it's really cool. It's a good looking movie. It's not it's not flashy or over the top, but it is, because it is so downplayed, and it's only one setting with these two characters mostly. I think that was appropriate, but the film definitely pulls out its bag of tricks, and with the editing and the sound, and again, like we mentioned, the subjective filmmaking, things like that it's kind of like sparse throughout, but I think it works really well. And I also want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the two characters, Jeremy, because it becomes, as these conspiracy theories are told to Agnes and conveyed to her, and as they find more and more bugs, the delusion becomes grander. And this film always comes to mind when I think of the idea of a shared delusion. Like this is, to me, like one of the best examples of that, because that's really ultimately what the movie is. Well, again, depending on how you look at it, how much of a horror or sci-fi film you think it really is. But to me, it's about these two people and these two characters in the motel, and one of the best examples of a shared delusion between two people. So starts off with one person mentioning something, and then by the end of the movie, both of them are totally believing the same thing together, even though it's completely illogical if you really stop and think about it. They just give themselves over to it. It's sort of like that cult mentality. And the movie, at times it's pretty funny. Like I found myself laughing out loud at
for
parts.
Sure. It's ridiculous.
But it's also, it is a ridiculous movie. It really is. But also scary at the same time. So the delusions become grander for sure, and we begin to see sores on the characters' bodies, and they're constantly scratching and twitching. Kind of reminded me of Jeff Goldblum in The Fly remake.
Well, it is interesting to think of this movie as body horror, because you mentioned Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. It's weird because it's almost like body horror of the mind. Like it's like I don't know.
It's like it carries over to their skin and.
Yeah, there's not that much like physical body horror necessarily. Yeah. There's not like things like growing out of them. But at the same time, like, if we're to believe it's true and their bodies are being eaten by bugs slowly, that's amazing body horror. That's terrifying, And
exactly.
So it's like, it's just one of those things.
Bugs could be so small that you don't see them as well. So like microscopic, so it kind of works in that way. Where again, like I was mentioning before, like this movie really does get under your skin, and it makes you feel like. I don't know. Anyway, so I wanted to mention the scene because we talk about body horror when he pulls his own tooth out.
Yeah,
because that's pretty gnarly. Like when he does that, and I remember that in the theater as well, kind of being like, oh, that's rough. And he does this because his reasoning is because there's an insect egg sac under the filling, of course, of his tooth. But that's just a memorable scene there. And then we have the tinfoil, which we alluded to. So the entire motel. It cuts from one scene to the next scene, and it's like the entire motel room is covered in tinfoil. It's just like it just like happens, and I kind of love that. It's just kind of thrown at you.
It doesn't
like
give
that.
you this movie doesn't really give you time to catch up.
It doesn't. It really is. It's one of those that like hits you afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're in it whether you like it or not.
Right. But the reasoning for the tinfoil, I guess, is Peter's trying, or they're both at this point, because now they're both sharing the same delusion. They're both trying to scramble the signal that the bugs are transmitting. And so, the entire room's covered in tinfoil, and there's something so abstract about this and absurd about the tinfoil that I kind of love it. Like, and again, certainly theatrical. You know, you can imagine that like being on stage and from the original play and everything like that. And so, but I love that they just really, again, they went for it.
Yeah.
And then the doctor shows up and he has like a line like bug problem and he's like, so we don't know who this doctor is, and it's like another one of those instances.
Yeah.
And we don't know if it's someone that Peter was talking about before, who performed these experiments on him.
Yeah, that was kind of my favorite part of the movie. I know we normally
when the doctor shows
up. I love movies.
It's a good scene.
Well, I love movies where you kind of can't trust anyone in the whole thing. You know, like anything anyone says. The movie, I don't know if you ever have seen it, Mark. The movie 10 Cloverfield Lane. It was a sequel to the Cloverfield movie, but similar in a sense that it's about, you know, a few people trapped in a small space and you really can't trust any of them. You know, it's almost a whodunit, but like with grander, more kind of psychotic implications. And I love that part with the doctor. And I think my favorite thing was that or the doctor or whatever he is, was that he walked in and he seemed like this authority figure, and then he immediately just rips a bong.
He rips a bong. I know, I do love that.
And it's like, wait, like,
then you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, like
that guy about
that's when I was just like, okay, like I have no clue what's going on here, but not in a bad way where I'm lost. I'm just like, is there's a mystery beyond my comprehension, because it goes, you know,
well, also first you think he's gonna hide everything because he starts to say like oh, what are you talking about, and you know, Peter was institutionalized and he's psychotic and all this, but then he starts to be like, you know, like all right, it was real, the experiments were real, like he starts to like kind of just starts like talking like, I mean, maybe that coincides with hitting the bong, I don't know, but,
well, it's also interesting just because what's so fun with a movie like this, and you know, I love movies that are built around conspiracy theories. I'm not a conspiracy theorist in life, but I really enjoy
it's
movies
very
about them
entertaining
because it's fun, and it's like you really can see people kind of spiral, and like, you know, if we're gonna throw our own theories out there, as I feel like you kind of have to with a movie like this, like I think the theory that is exciting to me, if we're going on the idea that this is all a shared delusion and not real, because like, you know, we can't rule out that it's all real, but if it's a shared delusion, for me, like, it brings up the question of the relationship of Peter to the doctor, and if we know that Peter is a manipulative personality capable of inducing delusions, then like, are we to believe that maybe Peter had some kind of experience with this doctor person in the past, and maybe him chasing after Peter is a shared delusion, or like,
well, at this point, like that, like, is the doctor even real? That's what I was also thinking, like, because you almost feel like you're like watching this film is such a strange experience. You like, at least I felt like I was becoming delusional watching it. So you kind of feel like, you know, am I imagining this doctor? Like, you know, so you really, it's so crazy. But I do love that scene, and it's keeps you on your toes the whole time, and then it ends with you know, like something that was shown a lot and sort of exaggerated a lot. I mean, it's very harrowing, of course, when it happens, but it was something that was shown a lot in the trailers and the commercials for this movie to kind of heighten the action aspects of it, which there really is not much action. But so anyway, so Peter ends up running into the room and kind of stabbing and killing this doctor who we just met. And and the whole time he's like, machine, like, screaming machine.
Very clearly not a machine. Very
like,
clearly.
Peter, what are you doing? Yeah, it's very clearly. Well, I mean, maybe, I don't know. It's still, I don't know. You really never know.
You don't know. Yeah, it's true.
But that when I don't know, that over the topness is like what makes this a cult film to me. Like that when he's machine, when he's stabbing him, and and then and also I forgot to mention the doctor mentions Lloyd, Agnes's son, as well, which is like he's trying to get under her skin as well. So you really don't know what this guy's about. He's like, we can find your son for you if you bring us Peter, you know, that kind of thing. But anyway, so this is like the culmination of the film here. This is the ending, and everything really does culminate because Peter kind of ties all the different conspiracy theories together. Even though I mean, you'd have to kind of look into if it makes any sense at all, but in his mind and in both their minds at this point, it does. So that's all that matters. Which is what happens with conspiracy theories. And because they, you know, really they can allow any connection to be made, no matter how illogical. And then they kind of end up with the same, the same conclusion that we have to kill them. We have to kill the bugs. So, I love this part because I forgot about this. I just read it in my notes. So there's a pizza delivery at this point.
Oh yeah.
Which is like so out of left field. You're like, what is happening? But I love it because the pizza delivery guy comes, and as they're kind of freaking out and making this conclusion that they have to kill the bugs, and they take the pizza, which is also funny because like who doesn't want pizza like at any time, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, we'll take the pizza. Well, they're like obviously like they're wary of the pizza delivery person, but they're like, leave it at the door or whatever, slide it through. So they take the pizza and they start dissecting it, and they're like inspecting the pizza, and they're
bugs.
picking through the pizza, which is it's just so absurd. I was just like laughing at this point because
there's a great shot in there too, because they have the whole thing where they're like, we can't open the door because we don't know if it's really a pizza man, so we'll just slide the money through the door. But for some reason, I guess it's a mail slot. But I don't know why a hotel room has a motel room has a mail slot. So like there's a slot in the door, which is very curious.
It's a long-term stay a motel. Yeah.
But there's a slot in the door, which leads me to believe that this isn't the first time they've had some kind of a transaction with, because they have to be eating. They it's not like they've stopped eating.
You never know how long they've been in the room, right?
So it really raises some interesting questions about like that's why I like this time jump so much. I know it probably is a little bit polarizing because I could easily see some audience members being really frustrated. But I just like the idea.
I'll tell you about one of them. When we get to the end of this episode, I want to tell you a story about that.
But I like, for me, it's so fun just having to piece it together. Because it's so ridiculous, because you start thinking about the logistics of how they've been going like this, and it's like, who knows how bizarre and how many people. I think about like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Mark, have you engaged with that? Like that. It's kind of that thing where you have two freaks living in a place where everyone else is trying to be normal. And like,
and you don't know what to believe.
Like there's one scene in that where like he wakes up the next morning and the whole hotel room is flooded. And there's like a cleaning woman there, and you see and I'm just like, this is what this is. It's just two people totally out of control, and like I love that we get that little hint of how absurd it is with that pizza man, but it's like they were still having to eat and probably exist and entertain the outside world somehow, and it's like I can only imagine the havoc that they unleashed on this little Oklahoma town in the process of getting to where they were.
And at this point, they're both all covered in sores and cuts and all over their body. And I mean, now I just want to take a moment and say, Ashley Judd, like I've never, I've seen her in a lot of movies, obviously, or at least at this time she was in a lot of movies. And this was really a departure for her. We'll talk about that too. But like this, this was not a glamorous movie star role.
No.
So it's kind of cool that she took this on and they thought of her for this. But yeah, so at this point, they basically stripped naked. Well, they don't basically. They do strip naked. And you hear that sound of the helicopter again, and the room starts shaking. We have that subjective thing with the lights. Now, at this point, the lights come pouring in, like through the tinfoil, I guess, or tinfoil falls down. But now everything is mixed with the sound of the bugs, so you kind of get that illusion that you were talking about, Jeremy, with like the blades of the helicopter and the wings of an insect. And the two characters, Agnes and Peter, strip naked, and they douse themselves in gasoline. And this is actually really sad. Like this is, even though you've kind of been laughing at this point towards the end of the movie, like, I don't know. It's something just watching these two do this that it's so absurd, but at the same time just so sad. And they tell each other like, I love you, and flames, and that's it.
I think it's kind of a classic tragic ending where it's sad but cathartic. It's
sure.
sad, but you're also kind of like, this is wild. It's
wild.
It didn't end, and I was.
Well,
just
it's like pure adrenaline at that point.
I wasn't like depressed when it ended. I wasn't like,
it's not a depressing.
I was like, wow, what an ending. What an insane piece of work.
It's like, wow.
Like they really.
What
went
did
for
I just
it.
watch? Like that kind of. And then you get the credits over the sound of crickets, which I thought was like a nice little topper there. Softly in the background, and the light sound of helicopter blades come back in. I think there is one other shot that happens. I think it's like after some credits, like we have the mid credits scene in like every mainstream movie now, but there's like a very short, I think it's just like, it might even be a shot of the grocery cart again in the store, but I forget. But something like that, which again is kind of like it's just a cool thing they threw in there. But so yeah, that's Bug. And I really am glad that you watched it, Jeremy, because I've been wanting to talk about this movie with somebody, and nobody has seen it. So even for a cult film, it's kind of like
I'm
a
excited
little bit out of left field, you know.
I'm excited to share this with some of my friends who would appreciate this kind of movie, because I can't really figure out how this one has managed to fly so under the radar.
Yeah, what was interesting, again, I'd seen it years before, but I'm currently writing a novel, and it's about cult members. So for me, like, 'cause it's about like these different members that live together in this big house. So a lot of it takes place there, and I found this film like really interesting depiction of that kind of mentality. Again, just the shared delusion aspect. And the paranoia and things like that. So it was good to watch it again. And just, I was excited to talk about it on the show. And we can't talk about this movie without talking about, well, a couple people, but one of them will be director William Friedkin. Obviously no stranger to horror, right? I mean, he made one of the biggest horror films ever, The Exorcist. And I think, in my opinion, he is truly one of the great filmmakers. I don't know your opinion of him, Jeremy.
I love William Friedkin.
I think he's, like Sorcerer, and I mean, even like Cruising. Like, I don't know. I really, his films are pretty great. And this is somewhat of a smaller scale for him, I guess, perhaps, which is interesting though. And because, as we mentioned, we still get those signature zoom-ins and things like that. And it does have his mark on it, I think. But he also, I think it was important because it has the Friedkin mark, but he also, I feel like he really allowed the material to breathe and to trust in the material. And apparently the origin of him even filming this movie is that he went to go see the play, and he just was like floored by it, and he was like, I have to make this a movie, and you could tell that he really didn't want to touch it too much. He kind of wanted to just keep it as it was, as he experienced it. So you kind of get that. I think that's super important with this movie.
It felt like he understood that he had an interesting piece of writing. And that the real star of this is the writing. Like that's the thing ultimately that shines.
He even shot it in chronological order, which I think is cool. Which, as we know from filmmaking standpoint, Jeremy, is extremely rare.
Hollywood and very impractical. But I guess when you're doing it, but I guess it kind of makes sense in this situation.
It makes sense here,
because you're seeing the deterioration of these two characters and the deterioration of the space. And so, I'm sure the DP was a little cranky about things at times, because they probably had to, like light spaces, then break it down, then light it again. But like from a production design standpoint,
apparently it was a horror. Yeah, the real horror was trying to film in the tinfoil room. Apparently,
the reflection.
Everything was reflecting, and
oh my god,
which I didn't even think of. But then when I started to think about that, I was like, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
Filmmaking nightmare.
But practically, I think it does make sense for this one for them to have shot it in order, and I think you can feel it in the performances. Not that these are both, well, all, not just both, all very capable actors, and I have no doubt that they could have pulled it off, not in chronological order, but I do feel like there is that certain something of like, it feels like it feels like a play, like it feels like it just has this forward momentum. It doesn't feel like there's a scene that's deviates from this
forward momentum,
this push the whole time.
I think it was almost as like essential for this movie to be filmed that way. It kind of seems like it anyway. I'm sure it helped a lot with the whole, with the performances and everything like that.
And it looks like it was probably a lot of fun to make too. Just
it does so ridiculous. Yeah, it looks like 'cause I watched some behind the scenes, because I actually have the DVD of this movie, believe it or not.
That's pretty neat. Hold on to that.
I know. Yeah, I'm holding on to that one for sure. I actually purged a lot of my movies, but I kept that one because it's just not talked about at all. But I watched some of the behind the scenes footage and stuff, and like the way, because they just shot it again, mostly just it was like on one set. I think in some high school or something like that is where they built everything. And when I looked at it, it just reminded me of like film school. It just reminded me of these really small, intimate kind of films that maybe like a smaller independent film or something like that, which is interesting because it's William Friedkin, who's like one of the biggest directors, in terms of horror and things like that. So it definitely has that quality to it. And I do want to give a shout out to the editor as well, which is, his name is Darren Navarro. And because I just want to give like a couple moments that I just thought were kind of like genius, like so out there, but so like during the sex scene when he cuts to like just a close up of a praying mantis really quick, which is, you know, they eat their lover after they mate. And then the moment where we're actually, you alluded to this before, Jeremy, but the moment when Peter and Agnes are looking into the microscope together, and it cuts to the microorganisms like moving around with the loud blaring heavy like what is it, like metal music or something? That's pretty great. Like, I don't know, I love how that part is edited.
It's so fast.
Millions.
It's so fast because it's just like that cut. It's such a timing thing, and it's like you see all the screaming and just the millions. Like it's so quick. Millions. Like there's no build. It just comes out of, because the whole movie is not like that at all. And then I love stuff like that. I love editing that keeps you on your toes. That's always like whenever I would edit something, that's always what I would have in mind. So it's
I love
such an adventurous cut.
It is. And there's a lot of cuts like that throughout the movie as well. And of course, we have to talk about the writer, Tracy Letts, who. So this is one of the rare cases where the writer of the original play also wrote the film, which might be part of the reason why it does work so well, in our opinion. In many people's opinion, maybe not, but we'll get to that in a moment. Or again, marketing, but we'll get to that. So the director and writer would team up again 5 years later with 2011's Killer Joe, another film based on one of Letts' plays, and a play he wrote actually before Bug. I'm not sure if it was the first one or one of the first that he wrote, but that came before Bug, and that is a hell of a movie, Jeremy. If you enjoyed Bug, I would say definitely seek that movie out, Killer Joe.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
It's certainly another cult film. Has some really memorable and bizarre scenes in it, and a very entertaining performance from Matthew McConaughey. He plays I'm
always down.
He's played, that character that he plays where it's kind of like a sleazeball. He's like a hitman sleazeball kind of, and but it has that weirdness and it has that theatrical over the top quality in certain scenes that you just kind of have to you have to watch it, Jeremy. We'll talk about that another time.
that might be one of my next ones, but yeah.
So they collaborated again, like I said, 5 years later. So yeah, definitely if you enjoyed Bug, seek out Killer Joe for sure. It's very different, but very cool. And the performances I want to touch on, because this was also another rare occasion here of an actor reprising his role from the stage play that the film is based on.
That's fun.
So Michael Shannon, he played the role of Peter on stage in a couple of different productions, I think in London and then in the U.S. as well, and which makes total sense because I can't picture anyone else as Peter, really. Like, he's pretty much perfect for this role, Michael Shannon is. And apparently Lionsgate wanted to cast an actor with more name recognition, but Friedkin was determined to have
I can't
Michael Shannon
imagine
perform.
I can't imagine anyone else.
He just told them how he brought like a, because he brings a unique quality to the part that you can't find in anyone else. And I think this is the first time I really became aware of him as an actor as well. And he really is something in this. And Ashley Judd, as I mentioned, I feel like, she was pretty, like, she was in a lot of mainstream films around this time that this came out, 2006. And so it's interesting, again, to see her in this kind of a film. It's something a bit different, I guess. Plays like a different kind of role than you would normally see with, and she does come across as very vulnerable and damaged, and I thought she did a good job.
I mean, she's wacky in this.
But she gets wacky. Oh yeah. So now this is what I want to close with, Jeremy, because speaking of wacky and the audience reaction, now again, this film, the way it was marketed, was not how the film really is, and I think a lot of people went into the theaters with that expectation. So when we started the podcast, I mentioned I'd gone to see this film with a group of my friends, and this may be like one of my favorite theater experiences ever, like movie theater experiences. And the audience reaction to it was like mostly disappointment, I think, and a lot of confusion. And again, now it's like, because they thought they were walking into just like a typical whatever. I don't know if what kind of horror movie they thought it was going to be, but however it was marketed to them, which again, and that's what I thought too. So we all kind of thought that, and then when the film kind of takes a turn, at first you're like, what is happening here? Is this just a drama? And then when it takes that turn, it really goes for it. And I think now I reacted to that in a really good, really positive way. But the rest of the theater did not. And to the point where it's the first time and maybe the only time I've ever seen an audience become hostile. Like they really well, there's a couple people especially that really were unhappy. And I knew this because they were very vocal. So there's a moment very like almost at the very end of the movie when everything is building up and there, there's this tension throughout, and Ashley Judd's character Agnes she's like screaming, and which it's a line that I love. Like it's like one of my favorite lines. It's like, "I am the super mother bug," which is so ridiculous. It's so
fun,
out there, and it's so fun, and it's one moment that I will never forget, because when she shouted that, like, I broke out into laughter. But the guy, now we don't curse much on this show, but I have to say verbatim what I remember, and it was just he was sitting behind me with his, I don't know, his girlfriend or wife or whatever, and he just goes, "Man, fuck this shit," and they both got up and they left.
I am the super mother bug. That's where they
and it all
out.
culminated at the same time. It was like, as she was screaming that, like, he just like got up and he was like, "Man, I'm out of here."
Oh, that's hysterical.
And so that's what I remember, like, from this movie, and that's why, like, it just, I don't know, a lot of reasons why it sticks with me. But and I think that line, like, if it wasn't already in full-on cult territory, that really pushes it into that.
Because that's the kind of thing you would see in, like, a B movie.
Right.
But this is with, like, an Oscar-nominated director and, like, like...
with, like, a renowned actor.
Renowned actors.
It's bizarre. Like, it's just... But again, they went for it, and I love that they did.
The playwright who had gone to do August Osage County, like, it's...
I know.
It's, like, very strange.
I know.
But I think
well, again,
that's so
if
fun.
you want more... If you want more in a similar vein, like very similar to this, then definitely Killer Joe. Want to check out? Yeah, it's very fun. Very fun.
Yeah.
Very dark movie. So Bug, is it? I mean, it's dark. Is it a psychological thriller, a horror film, a love story, dark comedy?
Yeah, and that's but it's its own.
I've come to the conclusion, like, it's all of these things. Like,
it's Bug.
It's very unique. It's Bug.
Yeah.
It's Bug. I think even Michael Shannon, like, it's funny because he played the part for so long, and so when they interviewed him on the DVD I was watching, and I'm like, all right, so he's gonna have some insight into this and all that. And when they ask him about the movie, he seems perplexed. Like, he seems not perplexed, but he seems like he's like, he always says something like, "I always thought of it as a love story." But then he says something like, "But it's called Bug."
Yeah.
So he's kind of like, I don't know, like, I don't really, you know what I mean, like, so that says something. Someone who's been playing a very vital role in this play, in this film, even he seems a bit perplexed by it.
Totally sure.
But obviously the audience I saw it with was very perplexed as well, and but I think I will say with both the play and the movie, I like how bold it is. I like how it's written, and I like what they did with it in the film adaptation, which doesn't always happen. They don't always adapt things the way you want, like you said, Jeremy. So pretty cool.
I think this movie, just to kind of close out, I think this movie was really probably about 10 years ahead of its time.
For sure.
Because I'm just thinking, the movie that I kept thinking of while watching this is The Lighthouse. And just
I think that was brought up before, actually, as well.
I
mentioned that before.
And
the Racerhead.
But The Lighthouse is just like, I feel like if this movie were to come out in 2022, as we record this near the end of the year here, like, it would probably be getting Independent Spirit Award nominations. And, like, considered...
And the memes. Can you imagine...
Yeah, oh my god.
Can you imagine the memes? I mean, come on.
Yeah. But like, I
am
feel
the
like
super mother bug?
This movie was made in a time when it was just a few years before we had this kind of art horror as
it was a little
its
too
own
early,
genre.
you're right.
And like if this had come out a little later, it would have fit right in with those kind of movies that are a little smarter but use horror to kind of present some bigger ideas. But at the time it seems like audiences kind of just maybe didn't know what to do with it.
It might have been a timing thing. I think you're right. I think you're right on the money with that.
Because I don't know,
it does explain a lot.
Yeah, like this movie coming out now, like, I feel like people would go nuts over it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I feel like no one would get up and leave because they would be too busy.
They would be in on the joke.
With glee. Yeah, it's like
right. They would be enjoying it. Yeah, I think this film actually has like an F for a cinema score. Like, I think it's and I don't know if it's changed at all. I do think people look back on it now, because I've seen when I was doing some research, I saw some articles that were kind of like revisiting Bug, like the strange film by William Friedkin. Like, I think now people can look back and maybe understand it more and appreciate it more. But I think you're really right on that, Jeremy. I think it was a little too early.
A little too early.
It was a little too hip for the room in a way. Like,
yeah.
And I think at that time there's still a lot of horror films coming out, but at that time it was like, I just remember like a deluge of horror films.
Yeah.
And it was just, that was like all that was coming out. And, this film kind of got thrown in with all of that, and people expected that,
Well, I think horror films at that time kind of there wasn't an expectation that they would be dealing with anything more than scaring you.
Or torture porn.
Yeah, torture porn. Yeah, and it's like like this movie.
I'm glad it wasn't that.
Yeah, it's like the Michael Shannon thing. It's like it could be a love story, and I think for someone going expecting Hostel, which not to knock Hostel, I think Hostel's its own thing.
That's when I think of 2006 horror, that's what I think of. Like,
but
Hostel,
it's like when you go in expecting Hostel or Saw or a remake of My Bloody Valentine or something like that, and you get a movie where it's people arguing about their lost child and bugs. It's like it's a little weird, and I think that discomfort probably rubbed people the wrong way. But I don't know. I think worth watching for sure.
For sure.
Worth watching.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah. I really didn't know. I was like, Jeremy's either gonna hate me for this or
no, I'm pretty open-minded.
Yeah, you're pretty open-minded.
There are very few things. As long as someone's doing something and really trying to be interesting and not playing it safe, I'll normally get excited about it.
I was like, he at least has to find it somewhat interesting.
Yeah. No, I thought this was terrific. I'm excited to watch it again soon.
Yeah, you should. It's show it to other people too and see get their reactions.
Yeah, have a little movie night. Have a little movie night and tell them nothing about it.
Yeah, don't tell them anything.
Not even the name. Don't tell them
anything.
Go right into it.
Yeah. Just put it right on.
Yeah.
Throw in your DVD from wherever I got that from.
Yeah.
I do love that I own that DVD, by the way.
Yeah. I'm curious to see the behind the scenes at some point.
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. Yeah, it's it might be on YouTube or something.
Yeah,
but
I hope I can find it.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, and we didn't even get to Harry Connick Jr. We had to we were going to talk about him, but anyway, he's in the movie.
He's in the movie and it does his job.
He sings a song and
plays
an abusive ex-husband, but
just does a Frank Sinatra cover and then gets his hand stapled.
Yeah, I do like the scene between him and Peter too.
Yeah,
we've talked enough about this movie. But stop there.
Go just go watch it if you haven't.
Go watch
for
Bug
some reason.
if you haven't. Yeah, for some reason if you haven't seen it. Yeah.
If not, just talk about it with your friends. Go talk about Harry Connick Jr. with your friends. So
yeah, go as friends do.
As friends do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for watching this movie with me, Jeremy. And thank you everyone who listened and hopefully watched the movie as well. So we're going to close it out here, and thanks for listening to Cult Movie Cult. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you have any cult films you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, or if you'd like to officially join the cult, be a guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. This has been Cult Movie Cult, and until next time, so long from the other side. I am the Super Mother Bug.
I am the Super Mother Bug.